vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नामाचार्य हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासवती गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा मय यमुना मय की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की समवेत भक्त वृंद की गौर प्रेमानंदे. All glories to the simple devotees, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, verse number 27. Asevayāyaṁ prakṛter guṇānām. Asevayāyaṁ prakṛter guṇānām. Jñānena vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena. Jñānena vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena. Yogena mayi arpitayā ca bhaktyā. Yogena mayi arpitayā ca bhaktyā. Mam pratyag-ātmānam ihāvarundhe. Mam pratyag-ātmānam ihāvarundhe. Asevayāyaṁ prakṛter guṇānām. Jñānena vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena. Yogena mayi arpitayā ca bhaktyā. Mam pratyag-ātmānam ihāvarundhe. Asevayāyaṁ prakṛter guṇānām. Jñānena vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena. Yogena mayi arpitayā ca bhaktyā. Mam pratyag-ātmānam ihāvarundhe. Asevayāyaṁ prakṛter guṇānām. Jñānena vairāgya-vijṛmbhitena. Yogena mayi arpitayā ca bhaktyā. Mam pratyag-ātmānam ihāvarundhe. Mataji? Okay, fine. Asevayā, by not engaging in the service. Ayam, this person, prakṛter guṇānāṁ, of the modes of material nature. Jñānena, by knowledge. Vairāgya, with renunciation. Vijṛmbhitena, develop. Yogena, by practicing yoga. Mayi, onto me. Arpitayā, fixed. Ca, and. Bhaktyā, with devotion. Mam, onto me. Pratyag-ātmānam, the absolute truth. Iha, in this very life. Avarundhe, one attains. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, But by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life. For I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. Let's repeat together. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life. For I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. Purport. When one engages in devotional service to the Lord in 9 different kinds of bhakti yoga as enunciated in authoritative scriptures such as hearing, shravanam, chanting, kirtanam, remembering, offering worship, praying and offering personal service, either in one of them or 2 or 3 or all of them, he naturally has no opportunity to engage in the service of the 3 modes of material nature. Unless one has good engagements in spiritual service, it is not possible to get out of the attachment to material service. Those who are not devotees, therefore, are interested in so-called humanitarian or philanthropic work, such as opening a hospital or charitable institution. These are undoubtedly good works in the sense that they are pious activities, and they result in that the performer may get some opportunities for sense gratification, either in this life or in the next. Devotional service, however, is beyond the boundary of sense gratification. It is completely spiritual activity. When one engages in the spiritual activities of devotional service, naturally he does not get any opportunity to engage in sense gratificatory activities. Krishna conscious activities are performed not blindly, but with perfect understanding of knowledge and renunciation. This kind of yoga practice, in which the mind is always fixed onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotion, results in liberation in this very life. The person who performs such acts gets in touch with Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya therefore approved the process of hearing from realized devotees about the pastimes of the Lord. It does not matter to what category of this world the audience belongs. If one meekly and submissively hears about the activities of the Lord from a realized soul, he will be able to conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is unconquerable by any other process. Hearing or associating with devotees is the most important function for self-realization. Thus in the purport, Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatorubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So welcome everyone for today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. This verse number 27, is spoken by Lord Kapila to his mother Devahuti. In this set of verses, there is a common theme of where Lord Kapila is emphasizing on the importance or on the principles of devotional service or bhakti. And the current verse, the main point is that that one has to always fix one's mind in devotional service onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the translation, there are 4 points. The first one is not to engage in service of 3 modes of nature. And the second point is that one has to develop Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And how do we do that? By cultivating knowledge, jñānenam, and renunciation, vairāgya, and practice of yogena. So these are the 3 things by which we can cultivate Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And by doing so, what happens is that one fixes one's mind in devotional service. Maya arpitayā means one's mind becomes fixed in devotional service. And by that, the result is that one achieves perfection. And in this very life. So, in this way, the translation goes about saying how by cultivating Kṛṣṇa consciousness, one's mind is fixed in devotional service and one gets liberated or perfection. Yeah, sure, I'm sorry. In this very life. Okay? These are all actually interconnected. It all starts with proper knowledge. So, when one has proper knowledge, then that means that one has a proper understanding. When one has a proper understanding, then one makes proper decisions in his life. And when one makes proper decisions, then there is proper actions. And when there are proper actions, then there is proper results. Right? So it all starts with knowledge. Proper knowledge, proper understanding, proper decisions, and proper results. Otherwise, if one does not have a proper understanding, then there is improper knowledge, then there is improper actions, and there is improper or undesirable results. So in this way, by cultivating proper knowledge and renunciation and practice of yoga, one will be able to achieve perfection in this very life. And in purport, Prabhupada talks about the first thing is how not to engage in 3 modes of nature. Because we all have this human body. This human body is made up of 3 modes of nature. You have goodness, passion, and ignorance. And even the highest mode, which is the mode of goodness, and the activities in that mode, such as philanthropic activities, even they are of the highest nature, one of the pious activities, but however, they are still within the 3 modes of nature. So that is why those activities does not have the power to liberate oneself. So that is why one has to engage in the devotional service in order to achieve liberation in this very life. And that is done by engaging in 9 forms of devotional service. And that is where it says jñānena, vairāgya, and yogena. So that is where Prabhupada says that this devotional service is not something which is performed blindly. It is performed with knowledge, performed with proper understanding. And by proper understanding, one naturally gives up this material sense gratification, which means vairāgya, means renunciation of material sense gratificatory activities. And as a result, one's mind automatically fixes and naturally on Kṛṣṇa. And as a result, one achieves perfection. And how does one's mind how to fix one's mind in devotional service? Mayy arpitayā. That is where there is an instruction of Lord Chaitanya to hear from pure devotees or realized souls. And how do we hear that? By meekly and submissively. By meekly and submissively hearing from the realized souls, one's mind is automatically fixed on Kṛṣṇa and achieves perfection. So, the stress here is given on hearing, right? Hearing, not just hearing from pure devotees. And these 9 forms of devotional service, we see the reference in 7th canto. The instructions of Prahlad to his father. That is where he instructs 9 forms of devotional service. And over there, in purport, Prabhupada mentions, hearing of the holy name of Lord, Shravanam, is the beginning of devotional service. Although any one of the 9 processes is sufficient in chronological order, the hearing of the holy name of the Lord is the beginning, indeed is essential. So this is where, it is defining what is Shravanam. Shravanam means hearing of the holy name of the Lord. That is Shravanam. But of course, this is actually a short definition of Shravanam. Does anyone know what is the long definition of Shravanam? What is the definition of Shravanam? Anyone who likes to take a guess? What is Shravanam? Can you define what is Shravanam? Yeah, I mean, hearing the holy names. That's a short definition. I'm looking for a long definition. Okay. So, maybe you can repeat after me. Tacha nama rupa guna leelamaya shabdanam stotra sparshaha. So this is the actual definition of Shravanam. When ears comes in contact with the words describing Lord's name, form, qualities and pastimes is called Shravanam. So of course in purport here, Prabhupada only mentions about the holy name. That's a short definition, but the full definition of the actual definition of Shravanam includes hearing the words describing the Lord's name, form, qualities and pastimes, the four things. Okay? But however, the first one is name. And there's a reason why the name is mentioned first. And the name is given more importance. Do you know why the name is given more importance? Anyone like to take a guess? Why the name is given more importance out of all the four? Yeah. That's the only means. Okay. So, Pradamam namaha shravanam antahakarana shuddhyardam apeksham shuddhe chantahakarane rupa shravane tad udaya yogyata bhavati. Of the four, one must first start by hearing the holy name of Lord, holy name, and purify one's heart. After that, one gains the eligibility to hear the form, qualities and pastimes of the Lord. Because what happens is that when anyone takes to the process of Krishna consciousness of bhakti in the beginning, the first thing is that, one has to chant the holy names. One has to purify himself, because a person is still conditioned by the three modes of material nature, and a person requires a good amount of mode of goodness in order to appreciate and understand the Lord's pastimes, especially the Lord's intimate pastimes. So that is why, even though all four are recommended, but out of four, the acharyas first emphasize mainly on first focusing or hearing the holy name of the Lord. And by hearing the holy name of the Lord and by purifying oneself to a considerable extent, then one automatically gains the eligibility or yogyata bhavati. Yogyata for what? To hear and understand the pastimes of the Lord. In this way, out of 9 devotional services, the main thing is, the first one is hearing, right? The Prabhupada mentions in the purport, right? The devotional service, the devotional life starts by hearing. And even in the hearing also, there are 4 things: name, form, qualities and pastimes. And out of all these 4, the main thing is name, hearing the holy names. That's the first thing. And after that, we can see in the purport also, where it mentions that one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees. So this is one more aspect, because hearing is important and hearing the name is important. And the second thing is that it's also important to hear from pure devotees. Does anyone know why so much emphasis is laid on hearing from the pure devotees? Because we hear this many times. Whenever Prabhupada mentions about 9 devotional services, immediately he mentions that hearing is the first thing. It all starts with hearing. And immediately after talking about hearing, the immediate point, most of the times he talks about is emphasizing on hearing from the pure devotees. Even in this current purport also, we'll see all these 3 things covered. 9 devotional services, emphasize on hearing and hearing the holy name. And when it comes to hearing, hearing from the pure devotees. These 4 things we always find in common. And we also might have heard this many times in the past lectures also. Hear from the pure devotees, hear from the pure devotees. Why? Why is that hearing from the pure devotees is given so much emphasis?
In Bhagavatam, there was one purport that pure devotee is the essence. Pure devotee has relationship with Krishna, and when he has a real relationship and he speaks, the how you call it, dust or how I don't know how to express, but you know this purport, right? Maybe you know the exact words what he means.
Sure.
That in his voice there is parts of Krishna's the dust from Krishna's lotus feet, and also bhaktyā sanjayate bhaktyā, it comes from heart to heart.
Sure, thank you. So, this is the reason why we have to hear Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita from the pure devotees is because, of course, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons which Jiva Goswami mentions is that idam cha shravanam Srimad Mahan Mukharitam Chena Mahamata Mahatyam Jata Ruchim Parama Sukadam Cha. There are two things why we have to hear from the pure devotees is that the first one is Mahamahatyam. Means one attains the most exalted stage by hearing from the pure devotees. And the second thing is that it grants the supreme delight, Parama Sukadam. These are the two qualities why so much of stress is given on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita from the lips of a pure devotees. And even in Bhagavatam also, in the first canto, in the beginning, there is this verse which says, Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukamukad amrita dvaya Drava Samyutam, means this Srimad Bhagavatam which emanated from the lips of Sukadev Goswami, therefore this fruit has become even more tasteful. You see that? This Bhagavatam is already nectarian, but however when you hear this nectarian Bhagavatam from a pure devotee, it becomes even more tasteful, it becomes even more nectarian. And in the purport to this verse, Prabhupada mentions the Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Sukadev Goswami, who is compared to the parrot, not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. Oftentimes we hear, Prabhupada mentioning about parrot. And by referring to parrot, what he meant by that, repeating exactly what you heard, right? That's what parrot does, right? Basically, parrot repeats whatever it has heard. But however, in this purport, it's, Prabhupada gives a slightly different understanding of what it means to compare Sukadev Goswami with a parrot. It is said, not for his ability to recite exactly, but his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of man. So here we can see that even the speaker of Bhagavatam has a contribution to make. You see, it is not only repeating exactly, but also the speaker has some contribution. So that is why it is emphasized that one has to hear from the lips of a pure devotee. Maybe I'll give you some example. Maybe it's just a material mundane example, but I felt that it is kind of relevant. So when I was in college or in school, like in my +1 or +2, I was staying away from my family. I was staying in a hostel with all my friends together. And after the classes, in the night time, after our dinner, we all friends used to come together. And because in your hostel, you're not allowed to have a cell phone. You're not allowed to watch TV because those are prohibited. So because we're not able to watch all those things, we used to talk each other, suppose you watch a movie which I didn't watch, then you tell, and everybody sits, around that person and hears that movie, right? Because there's no cell phone. And those talks will go on forever, like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and the person keeps talking, and we all so rapt attention we hear. And the person who is talking is so much involved and so much absorbed in what he's talking, everybody forgets about the time. You see that thing? I mean, the story is same. Even I can say the story, same story. But when I say it may be boring because I'm not too much connected with the story. But the person who is very much connected with the story, he's so involved. There is so much of rasa, and so much of absorption, and everybody around him is forgetting the time. You see, so it's not just about hearing that movie. It's about the person who is describing it also, because there is that rasa, there is that feeling, there is that in English language there is a word called reminiscence. You know the word reminiscence? Reminiscence means it's enjoyable recollection. He's enjoying, he's recollecting, but he's enjoying also the recollection. So in this way, that is why it is so much of emphasis is given on hearing from the pure devotees. That is why it is said, Maha Mahadyam Jata Ruchim Paramasukadam Cha. Means one attains the most exalted stage and grants supreme delight just by hearing from the word from the mouth of a pure devotee. Right? So, and there's one more thing. And also, there's one more thing in the purport where it is mentioned, in these 9 devotional services also, either one of them, or 2, or 3, or all of them. Now, why is it said like this? I mean, what is the intent behind saying that either you can engage in 1, or 2, or 3, or all? See, what is the goal? What is the goal of performing this 9 devotional service? What is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is that one has to 100% deep absorption in thinking of Kṛṣṇa. That is the ultimate goal. So, and this deep absorption you can get either by doing 1 devotional activity, or 2, or 3, or all of them. It's up to the person. Because what is perfection in this life? The purport talks about perfection, right? What is perfection? Perfection means basically going back to Godhead, right? And what is the criteria for going back to Godhead? Yeah, what is the criteria for going back to Godhead? As Kṛṣṇa told in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, attaining the Supreme. What is attain? What is the criteria? Yeah. So, antakalecha mam smaran mukta kalevaram. Means basically, ultimately one has to think about Lord Kṛṣṇa when leaving his body. That is the criteria. So, ultimately, it's not about 50%, 60%, 90%, 99%. It's about 100% thinking of Kṛṣṇa, and that is a perfection. And that perfection we can achieve either by performing 1 of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them. And so ultimate perfection of life is when one is able to think about Kṛṣṇa 24 hours, 100% of the time. And this remembrance of the Lord is actually manifested in 5 stages. Does anyone know what are the 5 stages of remembrance of the Lord? It is in Nectar of Instruction, verse number 8. Tannama Rupa Charitadi, you know? Yeah. Yeah, take the mic. Yeah. What is the first one? The first is Shravana Dasha, means Smaranam, means recollection. Means you are thinking of Kṛṣṇa, but the problem is that it's not that you are thinking 24 hours. Sometimes there is some breakage. Number 2 should be Dharana. Yes, that is correct. So absorption. In the absorption also you are thinking of Kṛṣṇa, but there are less breaks. I mean, your frequency of thinking of Kṛṣṇa is much more frequent. What's the third one? Third one is Dhyana. Dhyana means meditation. In the meditation, what happens is that your absorption or your thinking is even more deeper. You are thinking about the Lord's name, form, and pastimes, and your absorption is even more stronger. And what's the 4th stage? Dhruvanusmriti, yes. So Dhruvanusmriti basically is a constant remembrance, means no breakage. And it is compared to the flow of a nectar, or compared to the flow of like a honey. When you see the honey flowing, there's like constant thread, right? There's no breakage. That is Dhruvanusmriti. What's the last one? Samadhi. So in the Samadhi, that is what Prabhupada translates as trance, means realizing his constitutional position. So that is the ultimate stage of remembrance, where one is completely absorbed in remembrance of the Lord. So now when Kṛṣṇa says in the Bhagavad Gita that one has to leave the body by thinking of him, at what stage we have to leave the body? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? 5th stage. That is a perfection. That is why in the translation also for this purport, for this verse, it is said always fixed. That always is very important. Because when it says always, that is referring to the last stage of remembrance, which is actually the Samadhi stage. That is where when one leaves the body, attains the ultimate perfection. And these 5 stages of remembrance can actually be correlated to the three limbs of Patanjali's yoga system also. In Patanjali yoga system has 3 stages: Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So the first truths, Smaranam and Dharana, can be compared to the Dharana of Patanjali's. And Dhyana and Dhruvanusmriti can be compared to Dhyana, and the Samadhi is the Samadhi. But of course, the samadhi, the way Patanjali describes samadhi is of different, because he further classifies samadhi into samprajña samadhi and asamprajña samadhi. Means in samprajña samadhi, there is still, your cognitive senses are still active. But in asamprajña samadhi is where you completely transcend all the cognitive senses and merge in the trance. That is ultimate perfection. That is where asamprajña samadhi is talking about. And of course, that is also the samadhi which is referred in by Kapila also. Of course, Lord Kapila talks further about this samprajñata and samprajña samadhi in the upcoming chapters, especially in the 28th chapter, the first verse. He talks about yogasya lakshanam vakshe sabijasya nripatmaje. See, sabijasya. So that is where he is talking about sabij samadhi. Means sabij basically means samprajña samadhi. Because of course, Lord Kapila's instructions is also having, an element of meditative process. So that is why some of these terms kind of repeats or appears in the later stages of instructions of Lord Kapila, where he talks further about sabij samadhi and asabij samadhi also. And this is further described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu also, in 3.136. Samadho yoginas tasmin asamprajñata namani lilaya mayy labdasya babuvo kampani tanuhu. Means, when I playfully reveal myself to the yogi absorbed in asamprajña samadhi, his body began to shake to the extreme. And in nirvikalpak samadhi, after destroying all ignorance, I experienced complete bliss. But when I saw Kṛṣṇa directly, that bliss became thousands of times more concentrated. So basically he is talking about the last stage of samadhi, how when a yogi is completely absorbed in the samadhi stage, his body starts shivering and his bliss becomes 1,000 times even more. And of course, these qualities also are exhibited by Lord Chaitanya, when he was performing Sankirtan, and how he was, transcended, even this bodily platform, and he was completely, exhibiting the ecstatic symptoms, being completely absorbed in chanting the holy names. So this is perfection. So in this way, the verse today talks about how not engaging in the service of modes of nature, but by developing Kṛṣṇa consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed. The word always is very important, because that is referring to the samadhi state. In devotional service onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in very life. For I am the personality, the absolute truth. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Okay, yeah, just pass the microphone.
Kṛṣṇa Prabhu, thank you for the class. Where does remembrance of Kṛṣṇa's devotees and their activities come into play within this formula?
Well, I mean, that remembrance can come at the stage one itself. But the way this is classified is like how much % of time you are absorbed in remembrance. That's the criteria how this division is made. This division is not made based upon, okay, in this stage you'll only think about name, this stage you'll only think about devotee. It's not like that. You can think about, everything together, but it's about how much time you're thinking or how much time your mind is absorbed in such remembrance. That's the criteria. Okay.
How do we know who is realized soul and pure devotee in our community?
How do you know who's a pure devotee?
Okay, the question is, how do we know one is a pure devotee or how do we know who is a realized soul? Is it correct? Well, I mean, there could be many answers for this question. I mean, one simple answer could be like, even Arjuna asked the same question in Bhagavad Gita, right? How do I know a realized soul? And Kṛṣṇa talks about so many qualities. Okay, you know what? If you see all these qualities, these are some of the external qualities of a realized soul. And there are so many qualities which Kṛṣṇa talks in Bhagavad Gita. But internal qualities could be this one, what I have mentioned, because ultimately a pure soul is someone who's always thinking of Kṛṣṇa, right? Without any interruption. So, but the problem is that, because this being an internal quality, it is sometimes difficult to understand, because it's difficult to understand what other person is thinking in his mind, right? So at least by the external qualities, what are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, we can at least understand, who is a pure devotee to some extent. Arpitayā Prabhu.
Haribol, thanks for the nice presentation. First of all, a reminder to put your notes when it's posted on
Yes.
YouTube channel. You're still doing that? I hope so.
I'll do it.
Yes, please. And then the second thing is, if I understood Chirachara Gopinath's question properly, he was asking about, because you very nicely asked about the definition of Shravanam. That's Nam, Rup, Leela, etc.
Yeah.
So then he asked, well, where does thinking of devotees come in? So that's obviously in the Leela stage, because Krishna's Leela means with his devotees. So to remember Krishna's Leela means to remember devotees.
Yes.
Remembering Bhagavad Gita means remembering Arjuna and Krishna, not just Krishna.
That is.
And by extension, everybody else who's involved. Dhritarashtra and even Sanjaya, the secretary who's reporting to Dhritarashtra what's happening. So Krishna Leela involves Krishna's devotees. And it continues. It's not just what's recorded in Bhagavatam or what's recorded. One time one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, you say that Bhagavatam is ongoing, so is Joan of Arc part of that? And Prabhupada said, yes, if she has something to do with God consciousness, then she's part of Bhagavatam. So the Christian consciousness movement, ISKCON, is a continuation of Bhagavatam, because Bhagavatam means in relation to Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So ISKCON, everything that Prabhupada set up, it's all in relation to Bhagavan, and therefore it's Bhagavatam. So to remember Krishna doesn't mean just remembering Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, but also the activities of his pure devotees like Srila Prabhupada.
Actually, that is also clarified in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and also Bhakti Sandarbha, where there was a clarification that, because here it talks about Lord's name, form, qualities and pastimes of the Lord. Now there's a clarification, what about those things which are connected to the Lord? Are they also considered to be a part of Shravanam? That is where, Rupa Goswami clarifies that yes, they will also count towards Shravanam. That is there. Because, and they also have the same power and potency as the Lord's name, form and qualities. They also have the same potency of purifying.
Prabhu, how does one naturally elevate oneself through those 5 stages of remembrance? Because like you talked about the difference being between each stage, the frequency or the length of remembering, but how do you do without forcing yourself?
Well, yeah, so, it all starts with by hearing, correct? So, because Shravanam is the first one. And in the Shravanam, what happens is that Shravanam, there is also purification happening in Shravanam, because you're chanting and hearing the holy names of the Lord. There is a purification. But however, along with purification, one also needs to make sure that he is also hearing and understanding the Lord's pastimes. Because when you hear the Lord's pastimes, first of all, even before to understand the Lord's pastimes itself, you need some level of mode of goodness and some level of purity is required. And when the Lord's pastimes, when you constantly hear the Lord's pastimes, one's mind automatically, naturally, this remembrance will organically will increase. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all the whole the sadhana is about, right? The types of devotional service is meant ultimately, because the thing is that, because sometimes it so happens that you may be doing Shravanam, you may be hearing, but your mind is somewhere else, right? I mean, outside you're doing Shravanam, but your mind is somewhere else. Or you may be doing Padasevanam, or, washing the feet of your spiritual master, but your mind is somewhere else, right? So that is why it is mentioned either 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. What do you mean by 1 or 2 or 3? What it really means is that what really counts is that where is your mind? Where is your consciousness? That's what it matters at the end of the day.
In that slide, after definition of Shravanam, which was before now.
This one?
No, not this one. What is Prathamam, Namnach, Shravanam? Okay, yeah. Of these four, one must first start by hearing the holy name and.
Yes, this one. Pradama Namaha Shravanam
Yeah.
Shutyartham. Yes.
So after that, one gains the eligibility to hear. So my question is, because Prabhupada in Nectar, in the same verse, Tanama Rupa Charitadya Sukirtanana, he says, in the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha in neophyte stage.
Correct.
So this is called Shravana Dasha, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing transcendental holy name of Krishna and his transcendental form, qualities and pastimes, one can attain the stage of acceptance called Varana Dasha. So he said in neophyte stage one should start hearing, but here it says.
Yes. So, okay, I mean, we cannot like exactly break it down saying that, you're going to chant only, you're going to only hear for 6 months and after that only you'll start the pastimes of the Lord. It may not happen like that. You may start hearing the pastimes from the day one when you become the devotee itself. But the point here is that the primary emphasis, especially in the beginning phase, should make sure that you are hearing the holy names. So you are chanting more, because if you have to take chanting and hearing the pastimes, the first thing is that you finish your chanting. Chanting is the most important thing, because chanting is how for the neophyte the majority of the purification is happening. So the way we apply this thing is that to make sure that along with doing everything else, you make sure that you are, your chanting is happening, or the enough stress is laid on the chanting as well. That is the whole intention. That is how we apply this principle, because you cannot technically just separate out. Okay, 6 months you'll only chant, and then after 6 months you'll start hearing the pastimes. No, it may not happen like that. Because what happens is that people may be hearing pastimes, but their understanding may not be correct, or they're not necessarily purified enough, or for example, when I go to some holy places, on the street you will see some performance, like they'll do some drama, some Lord's pastimes they'll be enacting, and there are people like so much of emotion, sentiment, but some people, they may not be even following 4 regulative principles. You see, the basic purification itself is not there. I mean, if you're not even following the 4 regulative principles itself properly, then hearing the pastimes of the Lord, I mean, what can he understand and what can he comprehend out of those things? So that is why it is the reason for this Pradama Nama Shravanam is that in the beginning stage at least, there is a very high emphasis laid upon chanting and hearing the holy names of the Lord. That is the intention.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. The chanting of the holy names, is it, I understand that it purifies one's heart, so like it can help a person have more understanding for hearing like maybe the form, qualities, and pastimes. But is it more effective to have that chanting in like a congregational chanting? Is that why it's called Sankirtan Yagya? Is it because it's more effective in congregational form rather than just doing it by myself?
No, both are required, because that is japa. Japa and kirtan, they are different. Both are required. Japa has to be done. Japa is private and kirtan is together. I mean, in the 9 devotional services, both are given emphasis. You cannot just only pick one, because unless you are because what happens is that in the chanting, then you are actively making an endeavor to focus your mind on the holy name. So that is also required. An active endeavor from your side also is required. Yeah, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.